Welcome to the Cross and Sickle. This is a presentation that looks at the supposed barriers between Christianity and socialism. My name's Bill Mair. I'm going to tell you a true story about why all Christians should be socialists, even if all socialists aren't Christians. In 2016, I was standing for the Scottish Parliament for a socialist party. Here I am in Kirkcaldy High Street, handing out leaflets and talking to people. One day, a woman, not one in the photo, came up to me and announced, "I can't vote for you because I'm a Christian and you're a socialist." I answered her that Jesus was a socialist, but I was intrigued to hear what specifically about my policies conflicted with her Bible. She reeled off a few points. I'm sure you can guess most, if not all of them. We went through them, one by one, point by point. First up, abortion. A highly emotive issue on both sides. Understandably so. Most socialists would argue pro-choice. Most evangelical Christians would argue pro-life. So I asked her a question. How many times is abortion condemned or even mentioned in the Bible? It's a trick question, of course, because it's never mentioned once at all anywhere in the Bible. There are all sorts of detailed do's and don'ts listed. We learn that picking up sticks on the Sabbath or being rude to your parents carry the death penalty by stoning. You can't wear clothes of mixed fibres or eat anything from the sea unless it has both fins and scales. All sorts of minute, fine detail. A lot of issues covered. In fact, Moses covered 613 commandments in the first 5 books of the Bible alone. But abortion is never mentioned, even though it's existed from ancient times. You may have strong feelings about abortion, and you're entitled, but the Bible doesn't mention it once. Next up was assisted suicide. Now, we all know that the Bible comes down really heavily on suicide, right? And this lady was really angry about it. So again, I asked her. I wonder, I said to her, how many times is suicide condemned in the Bible? Well, it isn't condemned anywhere at all. There are 7 mentions of it, including Samson, whose suicide is regarded as heroic because he took out 3,000 Philistines with him when he deliberately destroyed the temple from inside. There are 8 mentions of it if you consider Jesus Christ's death a suicide. Remember, he laid down his life. It wasn't taken from him. Now again, you may have strong feelings about suicide or assisted suicide, and you're entitled. But you can't pretend that the Bible backs you up. Now you knew this one was coming, right? Homosexuality. This woman was pretty furious about gay marriage. She has strong feelings. I asked her, as a Christian, I said, so you're a Christian then? The name's in the title. You're not a Mosesian. You don't follow Moses. You follow Christ. You're not a Paulian. You don't follow Paul in the New Testament. You follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. Oh yes, she confirmed. I'm a Christian. I follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. Fantastic. So let's guess. How many times do you think Jesus condemns homosexuality in the Bible? I'm making this too easy for you guys. You probably guessed it. 0. Correct. Jesus neither mentions nor condemns homosexuality once. Jesus never mentioned homosexuality. The Bible never condemns abortion or suicide. So was Jesus all lovey-dovey all the time? Did he never condemn anything? Did he just go with the flow? No, actually. He really hated the pompous, hypocritical religious leaders of his time. Modern equivalents would be the late Ian Paisley peddling hate in the name of the gospel, which incidentally the word gospel means good news. Ironic. Maybe you've seen banners or placards like the one on the right here warning of hellfire if you don't repent or so forth. Or maybe you remember the farce in 2010 involving Iris Robinson, MP and MLA. She is a hyper self-righteous woman. She and her husband Peter Robinson, who is the leader of the DUP and the First Minister of Northern Ireland, were reported to be deeply religious and have always publicly professed their commitment to staunch Protestant values, with Mrs. Robinson denouncing homosexuality. End of quote. She was so incensed about homosexuality and gay marriage that she publicly compared homosexuality to child abuse. She said one was as bad as the other, and she claimed that she was obliged to say that because it was in the Bible. It certainly is not, Iris. The Bible says no such thing anywhere. But here's a fun fact. It does condemn adultery a lot. 52 times adultery is condemned in the Bible. It's mentioned in the 10 Commandments, in all 4 Gospels, and 10 other books of the Bible. Why do I bring this up? I'm certainly not judging anyone. I'm in no position to do so. No, I bring it up because it turns out that little Mrs. Perfect Robinson had been having an affair all the time that she was pontificating about the Bible, and her strong faith that she demanded she condemned people who didn't follow her God's law. Yes, the holy 60-year-old Mrs. Robinson had been having an affair with a 19-year-old boy. Not only that, she diverted £50,000 of public funds to give to her toy boy, and then took £5,000 of that back for her own use. The loudest, most judgmental Christian had big skeletons in her closet. Nothing new though. Listen to this tirade by Jesus. I'm going to read from my script here. Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? Now I bet Iris Robinson thinks he's talking to naughty LGBT sinners. He isn't. He's talking to the religious leaders of his time. He's talking to the Iris Robinsons and the Ian Paisleys of the 1st century. And then he goes on, listen. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything rotten and unclean. In the same way, you appear on the outside to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. He continues, just in case we hadn't got it, Jesus continues, beware of the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honour at banquets. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. Jesus tells the self-righteous religious leaders of the day that it's they, not the LGBT community, who are going to hell. Strong words. And of course, everyone knows the story of Jesus driving the moneylenders out of the temple because they exploited religion for their own ends. No, Jesus wasn't lovey-dovey and mercy and forgiveness to everyone. He knew where his anger was deserved. In fact, the overarching principle of Christianity can be summed up with this picture of the man in the clouds. Get off your high horse. We all know the story of the woman caught in adultery and how Jesus resolved a conundrum. You see, the religious leaders of the days, the scribes and the Pharisees, they really hated Jesus. He was upsetting their apple cart. All this peace and love and mercy and forgiveness was bad for business. They had it good with instilling fear into everyone and then holding the keys for their forgiveness. But then one day, the right opportunity arose. They caught a woman in adultery, banged to rights. Yes! They were ecstatic. How would Jesus get out of this one? Teacher, they said, we caught this woman in adultery, and the law commands that she must be put to death by stoning. What should we do? You can hear the glee in their voice. Jesus outfoxed them with a world-famous line. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Dejected, deflated, and confused, one by one, they dropped their heads, they dropped their stones, And they walked away. But that's not the punchline. Then Jesus looks at the woman and he says to her, "Woman, where are those who condemn you?" She said, "There are none." Jesus said, "Here comes a punchline. Neither do I condemn you." Yes, neither do I condemn you. Jesus Christ, God the Son, says to a woman caught in sin, neither do I condemn you. Reflect on that, you puritanical, self-righteous, evangelical Christians of the 21st century. Now, earlier on, Jesus had set the scene in Matthew chapter 7 in the famous Sermon on the Mount. He advised his listeners, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. With the same way that you judge others, you'll be judged. With the same measure you use, that measure will be used for you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and do not consider the plank in your own?" Indeed. Now, we've confronted the so-called barriers that stop Christians becoming socialists. Let's look now at some of the incentives. We know that socialists don't like wealth inequality. We want to share it out so everyone has some. What does the Bible say? You know that saying about a camel going through the eye of a needle? Jesus makes it pretty clear that if you're rich, you ain't getting into heaven. Nope. Greedy rich people go to hell. Not only that, he gives very clear instructions about what you have to do with your surplus wealth. Sell everything you have, give the money to the poor. Now that is redistribution of wealth, and that's a good, solid socialist principle. Of course, socialists nicked it from Jesus. In fact, here's John the Baptist setting the ground rules before Jesus appeared. He says, "Whoever has 2 tunics is to give one to he who has none, and whoever has food is to do likewise." Okay, you've probably also heard the saying, "all property is theft," usually attributed to Karl Marx. But did you know about the very first early Christians? They all lived together in one big house. Nobody called any of their property their own. Every one of them sold everything that they had, all their property and all their goods, pooled the money, helped the poor, and pooled their resources. The Bible tells us that all the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything they had. Sounds pretty communistic, eh? There's even a Bible story about a couple called Ananias and Sapphira who wanted to join this hippie Christian commune. But because they held back a little bit of their wealth for themselves and didn't throw it all into the communal pot, God struck them dead from heaven. You could say that the early Christians were more communist than Karl Marx. They were more communist than Corbyn. They were more socialist than Tommy Sheridan. Okay, we're done here. There really is no conflict for a Christian to become a socialist. The only barriers you might have will be those that you've learned from reading the Daily Mail. You can be like these communist Christians here in the photo, worshipping God in communist Cuba. If you are a Bible-believing evangelical Christian, join the party. Whatever good socialist party you can get your hands on. Peace out.